Welcome to another episode of Hornets Daily, your one-stop shop for all things Charlotte Hornets. As always, represented by the good people over at FanArc, and I'm your host, Vance Ballard, which you know by now you can call me VB. Want to thank everybody for joining us out there, watching along with us today. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, leave a like and a comment down in the comment section. As you know, we enjoy watching you guys interact and hearing some of your thoughts on what's going on the program as we continue to grow and build this Hornets Daily family here on the show. Mentioned it's a Tuesday. We've got a full docket for you. Got another game coming up on Wednesday. The Hornets take the floor in the Greensboro Coliseum. I know that's not the name anymore, but I'm not going out of my way to learn what it is. To me, it will always be the Greensboro Coliseum. On the show today, we're going to clean up a little bit of Game 3. A few things I left off I wanted to talk about there. We'll discuss that on the program here today. And one writer out there has agreed with me. He thinks the Hornets have found the best way to use their backcourt duo, Colin Sexton and LaMelo Ball. And once again, he agrees with me. And if you remember how I said these two should be used, we'll talk a little bit about that today as well. And is there some roster concerns, a little more roster concerns than we thought there was this summer, especially in terms of the supporting cast around the core three of LaMelo Ball, Brandon Miller, and Miles Bridges? We'll talk a little bit about that today as well. And then we're going to wrap the show up with a center battle. The position battle for the 5 spot is heating up. It's a little tighter than we may have thought it was. We'll talk a little bit about that today to wrap the show up as well. You know, we don't beat around the bush here on Hornets Daily. We like to dive headfirst into the program, and that's exactly what we're going to do here today. Now, as you guys know, the Hornets won their first preseason game on Saturday night, 120-116, knocking off Cooper Flagg and the Dallas Mavericks. And we talked yesterday about that game on the show, but there are some things that still need cleaning up. There are some things that still concern me despite all of the positives that we hit on yesterday's show. We talked a lot about all the good stuff the Hornets did in that victory. But as you know, there's nothing that can always be rainbows and sunshine with the Hornets. There are still some very big concerns. There's still some concerning issues with this team. Two of the biggest I took away from Game 3, as well as the first two, are two guys who are supposed to have a rather large impact on this roster. They're supposed to play pretty big roles, and that's Spencer Dinwiddie and Tajon Salon. Those two have looked, for lack of really no other way to put it, they've looked very poor so far this preseason. Now, I'm not as concerned about Spencer Dinwiddie. I'll tell you why here in just a second. But he has just 6 points on a combined 2 of 6 from the field and 0 of 4 so far from three-point land in the 2 games that he has played in the preseason. And we've talked a lot about Tajon Salon's struggles after the first 2 games. We talked about those on the show, as a matter of fact. And he didn't do much in terms of improvement on Saturday night. Just 1 of 2 from the floor, not a lot of minutes, 15 minutes, so not a shortage of minutes, but not an abundance of them either. 1 of 2 from the floor, and although that one shot he did make was a three-pointer, nice to see that fall, I suppose. If you're looking for something positive, he did add 6 rebounds to his case, but he also had 3 turnovers as well. Now, I know I told you all that I wasn't hitting the panic button just yet on Tajon Salon last week when we talked about his performance in the first 2 games, but my hand is hovering very, very close to it at the moment. We're going to need to see some sort of life, some sort of signs of life, some sort of positive steps forward from Tajon Salon. Again, he's supposed to play a big role, supposed to show us why he was that 6th overall pick last year. I know he was drafted as a development piece. He was drafted because of his ceiling. And I've told you several times this summer I'm very high on him. I think he is actually going to be pretty good. I think he's even going to take those steps this summer, but I'm starting to be concerned a little bit about maybe being wrong about that. He's just not showing that development quite yet in the preseason. Again, still plenty of time. Still got to get comfortable. Still 2 preseason games to go before next week's opening matchup against the Brooklyn Nets. So there is still time for Salon, and obviously he has the regular season to continue to improve and get himself comfortable, get in the flow of things. But we desperately need to see some of those positive steps forwards at some point, preferably in the preseason, as again, he is supposed to play a major role this year for the Hornets, especially in the paint, as we know that's not a super deep spot for Charlotte anyway. Again, I told you I'm not that concerned about Spencer Dinwiddie. The main reason there is because he's a veteran. He knows when the lights come on in the regular season. He kind of knows how to pick things up. I think he also understands that a lot of this preseason, while he is new to this Hornets roster, is still not really for him. He's not going to play a massive role within this team. He is going to be important when it comes to guard depth and coming in and keeping the production from falling off too hard, but he's not going to be the sixth man. He's not going to be the first guy off the bench. He's not going to be super vital. And if he does happen to struggle a bit throughout the year, he can be covered up. Those struggles can be covered up by that abundance of talent at the guard position anyway. Trey Mann's going to play a lot. KJ Simpson can kind of take some of that spot away if Dinwiddie does struggle. Colin Sexton will be there. LaMelo Ball. So there's an abundance of guards at that in that room. So that's why I'm not as concerned about Spencer Dinwiddie, although he has struggled pretty mightily so far in the preseason. Now, two guards who have not struggled in the preseason are LaMelo Ball and Colin Sexton. And I told you one writer over at Sports Illustrated agrees with me and thinks that the Hornets have found the best way to utilize this duo, and that answer is together. Now, that's what Zach Roberts thinks wrote in his column. That's something I have said several times this summer. Pretty much since the day Colin Sexton was traded for, I have said these two need to be on the court at the same time. Sexton needs to be the starter, and they need to play an abundance of minutes together. Now, that might not have been the intention for the Hornets when Colin Sexton was acquired, but it is starting to seem like that's going to be the way things go, especially after the performance they put together on the floor on Saturday night. It just makes sense that these two are together because of the things they can do, the openness of the offense, the different options that they provide the Hornets offensively, and I think they're probably the best combination defensively as well. I know neither of them are renounced or well regarded for their defensive abilities, but neither of them. LaMelo's not great, so people do get excited when he's guarding them, but we know he's working on that. He's taking those steps to improve this summer. But Colin Sexton's not the worst defender in the NBA, so I think him and LaMelo being on the floor at the same time actually bodes well for the defensive end of the floor as well. But the offensive advantages are really where it gives the Hornets their best opportunity to shine with these two on the floor. They're just those opportunities, the things that they can do, the options that they give are just too great to not utilize them together. We know that Charles Lee has preached for weeks now, especially since the start of training camp, about pace and being faster and moving the ball up the court. Well, what better way to do that than add another primary guard who can handle the ball, who can pass the ball. He's an elite passer, probably not as elite as LaMelo, probably not as good, certainly not as flashy or as fancy, but he is an elite level passer in the NBA. He's smart with the ball, doesn't turn it over very often. What better way to improve your pace, to improve your amount of possessions, to improve your ball movement than to add a guy like that next to a guard who is already a top-tier passer in the NBA when he chooses to utilize that ability. You do have to put that little stamp on LaMelo. When he chooses to utilize his passing ability, he is more than capable of being a top-level passer in the NBA. Now, again, I completely understand the want for Colin Sexton to come off the bench, the need for the feeling like there's a need for him to be the anchor or the captain, the point guard, the quarterback, whatever you want to call it, for that second unit, kind of keep those guys in check and help them out, be that veteran experience, be some of that veteran depth to that second unit. But I don't know that that's necessary either. I think we've seen enough from Trey Mann so far. I know he left with some right hip soreness, but I think he's going to be fine there. We've seen enough last year, and he continued that in 2 games so far this year. We've seen enough for him that he can handle that role, obviously not the veteran part, but the backup point guard role, leading the second unit, running the offense that way. He can handle that role just fine. So it's not as vital that Colin Sexton be there to provide that veteran depth, to provide that sense of leadership on the second unit. As Trey Mann can do that, he can handle the offense himself. Now, if this is done correctly, which I believe Charles Lee will do that just fine. I'm fully bought in on him. I think he is more than capable of turning this team around, handling this rebuild. And if done correctly, there should be more than enough instances where these two are not on the floor together, where it is just Colin Sexton running the offense, where it is just LaMelo running the offense, things going through each of them. But I do think it's going to be best on both ends of the floor for the Hornets for these two to play together as much as possible. I know, again, there's young guys that need that leadership, that need that guidance, but this right now, where the Hornets are trying to get to the offensive possibilities with both of these two guys on the floor at the same time, it just makes that much more sense. And Colin Sexton becomes he becomes a member of the supporting cast around the core that is Brandon Miller, LaMelo Ball, and Miles Bridges. But I also think he is good enough to maybe slip his way into part of that core at some point as well. I don't think I think he's a little bit above a role player or supporting cast member, although that's where he's going to fall with it being the core of those three already being established. But I do think he is a little bit better than just a description of a supporting cast member. Speaking of the supporting cast member, Charles Lee has said that finding a supporting cast around LaMelo, Miles Bridges, and Brandon Miller is going to be very important to the team this year. Now, that sounds like a very obvious statement, but it also makes you think, isn't that what was attempted, or isn't that something that's been taken care of with all of the offseason moves, with the rookies that were drafted, with the additions that were made? And you'd think yes, but now that we've gotten a small look at some of these guys on the floor, do the Hornets actually have that supporting cast that they were so desperately chasing and are in such a need of this offseason? We've seen a lot of mixing and matching so far from the lineups from Charles Lee with the lineups, as to be expected in the preseason, especially with a roster this new, this rebuilt. Now, obviously, the three mainstays have not changed. We know the starters are the starters, specifically LaMelo, Miles Bridges, Brandon Miller. Those three guys have remained the same, but we've seen different starting lineups as Con Knipple has been in there, Colin Sexton, Ryan Kalkbrenner, Moussa Diabate. All of the likes of all of those guys have been in the starting lineup. Charles Lee's also used giving different guys heavy workloads, lighter workloads. We saw Kalkbrenner play 25 minutes on Saturday night, whereas Moussa played just 12. Mason Plumlee played just 11. So we've seen him give the lion's share of minutes to certain guys to kind of throw them into the fire and allow himself to be able to see what he's got in terms of a supporting cast. He understands what the main three are going to do, but the goal of this preseason is of course for him to figure out what he's got as for a supporting cast. Now some things are starting to come together, but even in Saturday's win, the bench was still a bit of a concern. I mentioned on yesterday's show they were outscored 34-18 as a bench. So that's, like I say, a bit of a concern. Still some plugging in some play, and still got to figure out exactly who fits best where with who on the floor. That's going to be something for Charles Lee to figure out in these next two games, and obviously he'll continue to tinker with the lineups throughout the rest of this preseason. But I do think once he finds the right mixture of players, once he finds the right assortment of lineups, once he finds the right rosters and rotations that he wants to use his way, this team definitely has the talent to put together a more than capable, more than competent supporting cast around Miller, Miles, and LaMelo. I think that's absolutely doable. Now, obviously, it's going to be a very young supporting cast built around Colin Sexton. He's going to be probably, like I mentioned, he's a little bit better than a supporting cast member. That's a good thing, honestly, to have a member of your supporting cast be someone who would be considered above that on a different team. But built around Colin Sexton, built around Con Knipple, and it's really starting to seem like Ryan Kalkbrenner is also going to play a major role in that supporting cast this season, a much larger role than originally anticipated when he was drafted in the second round of the 2025 NBA draft. After just 3 games in the preseason, the battle for the center position appears to be heating up, and it appears to be much tighter than we thought it was going to be most of the summer. I've been very vocal about it. It's been all summer long that I think that Moussa Diabate should and is going to be the starter on opening night. I still believe that. That hasn't changed at all. But it does seem like the race is getting a little tighter. It does seem like there is more of a competition for that starting spot than I thought there would be, especially at this point or this early in the preseason prior to the regular season even getting underway. It's been said throughout training camp that all three centers are still in competition to start on opening night, but realistically, I think it's probably a two-horse race. Now, if I'm wrong and it is Mason Plumlee that runs out there on opening night, I'll understand why, as Charles Lee will want to start a veteran. He knows what he's going to get from Mason Plumlee. It's not going to be a long time, but it's also going to be a consistent, proven NBA veteran style game, a traditional center style of play that Plumlee can go out there. He will be the safer of the three options to be the starter on opening night. So as much as I don't think that's what it's going to be, if it is, I'll understand it for those reasons. But both Moussa and Ryan Kalkbrenner have looked very good this preseason in their time on the floor, with Kalkbrenner shining a little bit brighter than Moussa just solely because he's shining so much brighter than people expected him to in the first place. I'm not saying he's playing any better than Diabate, but it is hitting a little bit harder that he's playing as good as he is playing because it was just so unexpected with him being so unknown. Or not, well, he wasn't unknown. We know what kind of player he is, but with so many questions out there about him coming into this training camp, coming into this offseason. Now, I say all that to say I still think that Moussa is the leader in the clubhouse in terms of who's going to start for the majority on opening night and then going forwards for the majority, at least the early part of the season. I think all of those. I think it's going to be Moussa because of his athletic ability, because of his defensive prowess, because of his rebounding capabilities, all of the things that I've raved about all summer, all the things that I mentioned, and I also think he's going to figure out a way to take that next step offensively. He's going to find what works for him to score the ball when he needs to do so, when he's asked to do so. Now, he won't be asked to be a 20-point-a-night type of guy. The Hornets have those already, but it will be necessary for him to score when needed, and I think that he's going to be capable of doing that. As well, not all of those things piled on top of what he showed Charles Lee last season he was capable of doing, especially towards the end of last season when he was really forced into a lot of playing time, a larger role, and more minutes. He did show some signs of promise. He showed some flashes there to Coach Charles Lee. He's got the experience, so I think that's what puts him ahead of Kalkbrenner, ahead of Mason Plumlee. I think he is probably still the favorite to be the starter, but I'm also not doubting Ryan Kalkbrenner is nipping at his heels. We know the rookie had 14 and 10 on Saturday, and he still has two more chances in the preseason to show what he can do and make his case for being a starter in this Hornets lineup. He too is a defensive force. We know that's part of the reason, if not the main reason, why Ryan Kalkbrenner was drafted 4-time Defensive Player of the Year in the Big East while at Creighton. So we know he comes into the league, he comes into his career as a strong defender, relatively NBA ready on that side of the floor already. He's also looked a little bit quicker, if not much quicker, than most people thought he would coming into his career, especially on draft night, and then coming into training camp and the preseason. His quickness, his athletic ability was questioned. He's answered some of those questions. He's looked a little bit quicker, a little more athletic than people thought he was going to. Now, obviously, as I've said it already, we know that Charles Lee still has 2 games to decide. 2 games to decide who's going to be his starter at the center position. He also has 2 games to decide 2 positions to decide a starter for. But I think the big man is the one he's stressing over the most. Again, I'm not saying that Con Knipple and Colin Sexton are interchangeable by any means because we haven't seen what Con is fully capable of. We don't understand exactly what he's going to be yet. We do know what Colin Sexton can do in the NBA, so I'm not saying those 2 guys are interchangeable by any means, but I don't think it's nearly as impactful which one of those 2 starts as it is who starts at the 5 position. That's why I think Charles Lee is stressing that decision a little bit more than the 2 guard. And obviously, as I said, these final 2 preseason games are going to be huge for that center spot. Charles Lee, as well as the rest of his staff, are going to have a lot of eyes on that center spot. It'll be very interesting to see if Mason Plumlee gets a little more time, gets a little more exposure throughout those last two games, or if Lee continues to let Diabate and Kalkbrenner battle it out to kind of figure out what he's going to do there at that position as well. We'll have to wait and see. Obviously, on Wednesday, we have our fourth preseason game against the Memphis Grizzlies at, again, the Greensboro Coliseum. That should be an exciting matchup. We've got some things to watch for. We'll talk all about that after the game on Wednesday's show, or on Thursday's show. But we'll preview that on Wednesday's episode. Before the game happens, we'll talk all about that on another episode of Hornets Daily. That's going to do it for today's show. Thanks, as always, for watching, joining along with us. If you haven't already, once again, smash that subscribe button. Leave a like and a comment down in the comment section. Let me know what you think about the Hornets so far this preseason, what you think about their first 3 games, and the performance that they have put out on the court. As always, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time right here on Hornets Daily.